Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a really deep dive into the fascinating anatomy of something called dispensationalism. Now, if you've ever wondered about the hidden, almost invisible structural architecture behind modern end times beliefs, or maybe why certain theological ideas from the 1800s are literally driving modern geopolitics right now, well, you're in the exact right place. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this. A lot of people look at super popular ideas like the secret rapture or those highly detailed timelines of an impending apocalypse, and naturally, we just assume these are ancient concepts, right? It's so easy to think they've been passed down completely unchanged from antiquity. But here's the really fascinating reality. The modern end times framework, it's actually a very recent historical innovation. No way around it. It isn't modern invention. So what exactly is dispensationalism? Basically, it's a highly specific 19th century theological and interpretive system. For centuries, ancient thinkers dealt with textual discrepancies in the Bible by using allegory, or, by just searching for the broad core message of the gospel. Dispensationalism does something entirely different. It treats these ancient biblical texts with a strict, almost engineering-like logic. It literally applies a rigid, chronological template right over the Bible. To really understand how this intricate framework operates, we've got a clear roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the origin of this new theological system. Second, the doctrine of the 7 epochs of history. Third, the 3 main methodological pillars holding it all up. And fourth, how modern logic interacts with ancient texts. All right, moving right along to section 1, the origin of a new theological system. So this whole story really kicks off in the 1830s. The system was first formulated by a British-Irish theologian named John Nelson Darby. But here's the thing, it didn't stay a fringe idea. Fast forward to 1909, and it gets massively popularized by American theologian Cyrus I. Scofield through his incredibly famous Reference Bible. From those 19th century roots, this framework just spread like wildfire. It grew to absolutely dominate modern American evangelical and fundamentalist movements today. And the ways Scofield popularized this, honestly, it was an absolute masterclass in publishing. He didn't just write a separate book about Darby's system. No, instead, Scofield took his extensive explanatory footnotes and placed them directly on the exact same page as the biblical text. Because of this layout, millions of readers unconsciously absorbed this highly specific 19th century interpretation grid as if it were an inseparable part of Scripture itself. They were essentially reading Darby's modern system right alongside ancient verses, sometimes without even realizing where the ancient text ended and the modern commentary began. Pretty wild, right? Let's move to section 2 and see how this builds. The doctrine of 7 epochs of history. Now, the term dispensation actually comes from the Greek word oikonomia, which basically means household management. Dispensationalists use this concept to divide human history into 7 distinct, clearly defined epochs. We're talking innocence, conscience, human rule, promise, law, grace, which is identified as our current church age, and finally, a future millennium. The foundational idea here is absolutely crucial. During each specific era, God deals with humanity under completely different contractual terms. And this brilliantly illustrates why the system became so incredibly popular. It acts as an elegant, albeit highly artificial, solution to biblical contradictions. Think about it. If you find a strict rule in the Old Testament that seems to completely clash with something in the New Testament, this engineering logic solves the puzzle super easily. It just declares that the rules of one dispensation, like the era of law, are completely invalid and non-applicable in another era, like the era of grace. It's a remarkably tidy way to organize thousands of years of complex, highly diverse, ancient documents. Okay, on to section 3, the 3 main methodological pillars. Now, what's really interesting about this is how it outlines the strict rules of interpretation, holding this whole chronological structure together. The first pillar is a radical, absolute separation between Israel and the church. Historically, much of Christianity relied on replacement theology, where the church basically inherited the promises made to Israel. Well, dispensationalism completely rejects that. It asserts God has 2 completely separate plans. It assigns earthly, geopolitical promises strictly to Israel. Meanwhile, the church only receives heavenly promises and is actually viewed merely as a temporary historical parenthesis before God resumes work with the physical Israel. That brings us to the second methodological pillar, ultra-literalism. While dispensationalists might read poetic books figuratively, they insist, and I mean absolutely insist, that ancient prophetic and apocalyptic literature must be read strictly literally. So, when ancient prophets speak of restoring a temple or the destruction of specific nations in the Middle East, they aren't reading those as spiritual metaphors for salvation. Nope, they are read as exact blueprints for future geopolitical events. Impartially speaking, it is this specific interpretive pillar that directly fuels modern Christian Zionism in the United States. It literally provides the religious and theological rationale for unconditional political support for the State of Israel. So the crucial point here is how these pillars culminate in the third pillar, the strict chronological sequence of the end times. Based on John Nelson Darby's synthesis of the Apostle Paul's letters and the book of Revelation, it unfolds in 3 totally unchangeable steps. Step 1 is the secret pre-tribulation rapture. This is an invisible, instantaneous event where all true Christians are removed from the planet. Step 2 is what follows immediately after, a period of apocalyptic great tribulation right here on Earth. And step 3 is the literal, sequential fulfillment of the horrors described in Revelation. The core logic is that the apocalypse simply cannot literally begin until the church is completely removed from the equation. Finally, we arrive at section 4, modern logic and ancient texts. Our source material provides a really sharp summarizing critique here. It notes that dispensationalism applies, and I quote, a strongly rationalistic, modern, and essentially engineering logic to ancient codices. Essentially, the system takes wildly disparate literary traditions, we're talking Jewish apocalyptic writings, Paul's letters, prophetic oracles, and forces them into a unified, contradiction-free timetable for the end of the world. In doing so, it largely ignores the wildly diverse genres and contexts intended by the original ancient authors. It's almost like trying to fit a bunch of different puzzle pieces from completely different boxes into one single frame. When you step back, dispensationalism is truly a masterclass in how a single framework invented in the 1830s can completely rewire how millions of people understand the past, the present, and the future. By placing modern architectural logic over ancient poetry and letters, an entirely new worldview was born. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder today. How much does the modern lens through which we read history end up fundamentally changing history itself? And as we've clearly seen with its massive impact on geopolitics, how much does that lens change our present world? Keep exploring, keep asking these big questions, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.